Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Plotting Shed.
Welcome, come on in. We are Rachel and Isabel,
So,
and today we're going to be talking about raising stakes and tension in your writing.
so where are we going to begin? Probably with the most obvious one, which would be like your plot twists or your external conflict. So, what do they look like, Isabel?
So you can have several different kinds of plot twist, each of them to kind of develop a different element of plot or the world or the characters. But some good examples are things like betrayal. That's always such a fun plot twist, and it really adds stakes and tension because it introduces a different dynamic, a different antagonist, and something else that needs to be thwarted. Anything else?
Hmm. Yeah, the bad guys closing in. The baddies finally catching up on them. I think that's a really great way to raise the tension. And usually, when that happens, we're already lulled into this like false sense of security. So if you're watching a movie, you'll know that when there's 15 minutes left of the film, everything feels like it's going to be brilliant and they're going to make it, and yay, they've done it. And it's kind of like that in a book as well. When you're telling a story, you have this false sense of security, and then suddenly the bad guys come again, or something happens, and you realize that's not who they said they were.
Yes.
So that's a lovely one.
Yeah, and it kind of ties in really nicely with a false victory and with capture as well. So false victory is when you think that you have defeated the bad guy or you've got one over them, and then actually find out that they have a backup plan or they're not quite dead or something like that, and then surprise, they attack again. And the capture is kind of the same, that you are in a situation where you feel like you're safe, and then everything goes up
Yeah.
and you are captured or another significant character is captured, and it really throws the whole plan and the whole plot into a different direction.
Yeah, or that safe person isn't who they said they were.
Mm.
That's always creepy.
You can have a lot of fun with plot twists.
Yeah. Injury is another one. So if you have somebody who is escaping from like a situation, and then they are injured in some way, the tension is just going to be raised immediately. And that's a lovely way to show some kind of external conflict. But then there's obviously the opposite of that, which is internal conflict, and that can raise tension amazingly well at the same time. And internal is very much what's happening inside your characters. So what could that be, Isabel?
So you've usually got a lot of like inner weaknesses or flaws or fears and doubts and things like that that your characters are going to be struggling with and trying to overcome. Or it could be something like a romance, that if
Mm.
you've got that really sizzling tension between two characters, the kind of will they, won't they give into their feelings. That's a really fun way of playing with tension and exploring those character arcs through that internal
Mm.
monologue and internal desire.
Lovely. Someone that does the internal tension really nicely is Shutter Island, both the book and the film, because they're playing with memories, and that's such an internal thing, isn't it? Like perception and memories. That's so strange to have kind of tension raised by believing somebody, and then be like,
Yes.
"Oh," like it's very, very well done, very clever.
Yeah. Psychological thrillers are great examples for that internal tension because it's so much about what you think you can hear or what you think is going on and your own brain kind of working against you.
Yes, and actually, I'm reading American Psycho at the moment for the first time. I'm halfway through. It's tough to read. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm finding it hard. But something that happens in the film, which I have seen, is that he'll say things that the other characters like don't seem to hear, and he says things and they're horrific, and the other characters don't seem to hear. And I was super interested to see how that was going to happen in the novel, and it's very much the same. Like they're having dinner, and he'll say these horrific things, and then it's just like everybody just carries on with the conversation like it never happened. And it's so strange because you start to think, well, did they say that? Or is that in their head? Which is like a key element, isn't it, of the film as well? Really like weird tension because you're not sure what's real and what's not, and when someone is going to hear.
Really, really interesting.
Yeah,
I love that.
it's clever but tough.
Yeah, I don't know if I could quite handle that one. And then along with plot twists, we also have the ticking clock slash deadline, which is a really, really fun device. So what does that look like, Rachel?
Yeah, quite literally, it can be a ticking clock. There's like an explosive device that's going to go off somewhere, or they have to do this thing by this deadline. I mean, even if we look at something like, and I'm saying this because I watched it like 2 days ago, The Devil Wears Prada. Tension's high in that movie, and it's because of a ticking clock deadline situation. We're constantly being reminded that something needs to happen now because, like, Paris is on the horizon, and we need to get something out. It's by the next issue. It's got to be by this kind of deadline, and it's a stressful watch for that, and that's really interesting. So yeah, it doesn't have to be this like huge world-ending scenario, but it can be world-ending for your character.
Yes. And you've got that classic like run through the airport to tell the person how you feel about them. And that's a deadline because if they get on the plane and they leave, that's your window gone. You're going to miss that shot. And so things like that, having a really clear kind of cutoff point
Mhm.
makes the stakes really obvious for the reader then of like, you need to achieve this by then, otherwise you've missed your shot. So that's always a really good, fun way of creating that stakes and tension.
Absolutely. So we also have turning the tension dial up and down. So if your story is just constantly tense, it's going to be really stressful to read and not that much fun for anyone. Even a thriller isn't consistently tense all the way through. And we need to turn that dial up and down to make those tense moments tenser and to do things like lure your reader into this false sense of security so that they feel worse when this kind of horrible thing happens. And I'm always thinking when I think of that as like the classic horror movie, because in a way, all horror movies start, don't they, in this kind of glorious, like, gosh, life is kind of perfect. And isn't this strangely nice, even though there's this like creeping feeling over your shoulder because you're watching a horror movie. So, but you begin with something calm and nice.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes, if your book is tense the whole way through, then it kind of undermines the real moments of tension because it's hard for the reader to really distinguish between just general tension and then like really high impact tension. And so having those much slower moments of introspection where characters can interact with each other on a more normal level, or they can reflect on what's happening and kind of process their own thoughts and feelings. It gives the reader the chance as well to do the same alongside them and to feel what they're feeling and think things through. And in the case of a mystery or a thriller, try and piece everything together with the characters rather than just being constantly like, oh my God, we're constantly about to die.
Yeah, yes, that would be very stressful. Um, and then we have cliffhangers, the
Mm.
classic. People use cliffhangers in different ways. But obviously, a cliffhanger always works best at the end, which is very much what it kind of means at the end of a chapter, at the end of a scene. You're trying to get the reader to come back. And I like to think of cliffhangers as those things that make your reader want to stop reading at midnight, but they end up reading until 3 because they can't quite put down your book. Because every time they try to end a chapter, they're like, oh, but there's something coming. There's something coming later. And cliffhangers, again, they don't have to be this like super tense, oh my goodness, this is coming next, somebody's hanging off the edge of a cliff. They can be more subtle, like a promise of what's to come. And I think that it's really nice to play with the volume of that as well. If we're thinking about, okay, so some cliffhangers might be a realization of if I do this now, I don't know what's going to happen. And others can be really high volume.
And cliffhangers are great for ending the chapter to kind of, as Rachel was saying, have that rolling effect to make you want to keep going. And it's great for things like the bad guys just walked into the room, end chapter, new chapter begins. But you do need to be mindful of not overdoing it because if every single chapter is ending on a cliffhanger, kind of like with the ticking clock and like suspense and stuff like that, it's not really giving the reader a chance to relax if, as we're saying with a dial, that your conflict is constantly up and the reader isn't getting a break to just absorb everything that's happening.
Absolutely. And I've got to say as well with cliffhangers, be really careful to make sure that you are giving that payoff to the reader. A pet peeve of mine as a reader is when I hit a cliffhanger and the next chapter is like skips past it. And it happens, you know. Sometimes it's almost like the next day, and I'm like, no, hang on a minute, because you ended on a moment that was going to be so dramatic. And I don't want to read about that in retrospect. I want to live it with the read, like with the character. So tell me what happened. Don't skip past that moment. Give them,
Yes, I see that quite a lot actually, this kind of exposition that sums up, oh, and then all of these things happened and now we are where we are. No, 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 no. Give
yeah,
me everything in the moment. Let me feel what they felt in that moment.
yes, because I was scared and I want it. I want to know.
Yeah, for sure. So the best way that you can kind of implement all of these things is through your pacing and how you are positioning those things and where you're positioning them in the book. So if you're introducing your stakes early on, as it's encouraged that you should, then you want to continue the stakes all the way through the book, not have unclear stakes and the reader's not really sure what's involved. And then right at the end, be like, oh, by the way, if we don't do this, then the whole world's going to end, because that comes a little out of nowhere. We need those stakes to progress with the entire narrative.
Absolutely. Pacing as well is something that's going to depend on your genre. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a thriller, it is going to be something that you want to be fast paced if you're paying attention to genre conventions. And to create a quick pacing, you really want to think about your language and sentence structure and choice. You want to think about the difference between telling and showing and making sure you're using those at the right moments as well. If you are simply telling and you're using loads of dialogue, a reader is going to fly through your work. If you slow down a little and show them some things, when you want there to be less tension and you want to slow down that pacing, it's going to make those tense, higher paced elements much quicker as well.
Exactly. And having scenes that are very action packed as well, they're usually going to use very short, sharp sentences because it's all about the pacing. It's all about making it snappy and feeling like you're in that moment with their character when they're struggling to breathe and they're injured and it's all very, very stressful and chaotic. It's less likely it's going to be poetic and they're going to be having lots of internal monologue. So, really thinking about how you're writing those scenes as well will impact how quickly the reader gets through it.
Yes. And I would say as well, with things like battle scenes, because you're taking your reader through this quite high tension, fast-paced element, be careful that it doesn't go on for too long
Mm.
because it is exhausting to be in that scenario as probably a character, but definitely a reader. And you know, there are some like films that I love, but I know that the action scenes go on way too long for me. So I avoid those kind of elements of them, or I fast forward a little bit through some of it because I don't love those moments. It's very high tension. I want to see those moments and enjoy them, but in a novel as well, we really need them to be not carrying on chapters and chapters and chapters. Your reader's going to disengage.
And you don't want to keep falling back on the same devices. So, for example, if you have the false victory where you think that you've overcome the bad guy and then surprise you haven't, don't use that three times because it's going to get really old really, really quickly. And I've seen films as well that do that where you think, oh God, here we go again. And they're back up again and we're still fighting. And it does get a bit old when
Yeah.
you're not getting, as Rachel was saying, that payoff for what you've kind of been promised.
Yeah, and if you do overuse it, your reader's going to start to predict what happens.
Mm,
And once you start to predict what happens in a story, whether it's a film, a book, whatever, you do disengage. Because what's the point? What is the point of reading something that you already know what's going to happen? You don't usually.
yeah.
So, yeah, be careful, we're saying, with your pacing and your tension, and really pick those significant moments. Like, what is it about this story that ties to the stakes? What moment is going to be incredibly high tension, and what moment can I downplay a little to create some kind of calmer moments so that those moments are better?
Mm. And within every genre, there will be elements of external and internal conflict. And so picking the ones that are going to be most relevant to your book and your genre and your particular story is really important. And having those stakes really will be what drives the entire story and what makes a reader want to read because they're curious about what will happen to the characters if they do or don't get what they want.
Yeah, exactly. And genre conventions are absolutely something you'll already be aware of. I mean, if you are writing a fantasy book, for example, I'm imagining, read fantasy books. And so you'll have like an intrinsic understanding of genre conventions, but it doesn't hurt to look them up. And especially if you are moving into a new area, maybe you're moving into a new genre, maybe you're writing a thriller, you've not necessarily done that before. Have a read of some thrillers. Think about genre conventions of thrillers and what you would like to use, because genre conventions are not like tropes. Tropes are very much an optional thing. Genre conventions are what your reader expects. And if they're going for a certain genre, they will expect a certain level of tension. And it's lovely to be able to give that to them so that they feel satisfied and so that they give you more kudos and become one of your regular readers.
Yes, and hopefully that's what we want.
Yeah.
Nice. So you can check out all of our other videos on the Plotting Shed. You can give us a follow on Instagram as well.
Yeah, and subscribe, say hello. We're very friendly. And if you would like to see any videos about any particular subjects, please feel free to send us a message or just comment underneath, and we would love to kind of have a look and get around to them.
Yes, and we'll see you in our next video.
Bye.